So unit rates, super easy, not difficult at all, especially when you get to use a calculator because that helps you out with the math portion of it. And this is something that you could do all the time as you get older. Okay, so first of all, let's figure out what it defined it as. So a rate, a unit rate is a specific type of rate. So we have a rate. A rate is a ratio. So we've been working on ratios. A rate is a specific type of ratio that compares two quantities with different measures. So it can't just be two quantities as in apples and oranges. They have to be measures of something. So dollars per ounces, miles per hour, gallons per hour, words per minute. Things like that. Does that make sense, guys? So it's two things that are a measure of something else. Where then we talk specifically about a unit rate is when the ratio, this rate, has a second term of 1. And those were all the examples that I was just giving you. I drive 25 miles in 1 hour. I type 60 words in 1 minute. It cost me $3.99 for a pound of steak. Okay, it's $2.49 for 1 gallon of gas. Does that make sense, guys, what I mean by unit rate? Yeah. Questions at all? All right, so here's how you find it. To find unit rate, well, let's do an example, actually. We'll go back and forth. So this first example says $6 for 8 erasers. The first thing you have to do is write it as a ratio. So how do I write that first example as a ratio, you guys? 6/8. So first things first, write it as a ratio. You don't have to label it, none of that sort of stuff. Just write it as a ratio. Write it as a rate. So to calculate the unit rate, you have to divide the blank of the ratio by the blank of the ratio. So if I have 6/8, what in the world do you think I'm dividing? What? Numerator divided by the? There we go. Just like we do with fractions, guys, it's always numerator divided by denominator. So I'm going to write 6 divided by 8 equals. Now, one thing that I could do if I don't have a calculator is I can make this fraction easier on myself, right, guys? What can I do to this fraction? What's it simplify to? So I know the fraction simplifies to 3/4. 3/4 is one of those fractions that I should have memorized. We should know what the decimal is. We should know what the percentage is. That's one that we should know off the top of our heads. What is it? So 6 divided by 8 is 0.75. If you have a calculator, though, what would you do? You would type in 6, hit the divide by sign, hit the 8, hit the equal sign, and you should be good to go. And you would get 0.75. Okay? Now we have to write our unit rate. The answer is not just 0.75. 0.75 what? Dollars. Now, that means it's 75 cents. Well, 75 cents for what? For a ratio. So you say per. Now, we don't write per. It's a backslash. But that backslash means per. So you can write per, but we like to shorthand everything that we can. So that would be a backslash. And then we would write eraser. You can write one eraser if you want, but you just need eraser. So it's 75 cents per eraser. So this is something that you could do when you go to like the grocery store and you're trying to figure out, well, how much is something going to cost me? Okay, things like that. So here's the last hint. When dealing with cost means money, the money or the cost as they called it, will be the numerator. You guys remember that from when we talked about ratios? Money always goes on top. Same thing with unit rates. That's not changing. Money always goes on top. Questions on that, you guys? Okay, so what about the next one then? It says 300 miles in 5 hours. How do I write that as a ratio? What? 300 over 5. You must write it as a ratio. Now, what am I going to do to find the unit rate? What am I doing? I'm going to do 300 and divide it by 5. Now, if you had a calculator, this is where you would type in 300 divided by 5. This is one that most of you can probably do in your head. Okay? So what is 300 divided by 5? 60 over 1, or just 60. And then you must write it as a unit rate. So what's my unit rate? 60 what? What is it? Now it's not just miles, it's miles per hour. Do we have an abbreviation that means miles per hour? So that tells me that we can write MPH because that is a known abbreviation. If it is not a known abbreviation, do not abbreviate it, okay guys? You have no idea. That abbreviation you use might actually mean something else. So do not use it unless you know what it is. Got it? So right here, guys, this is what I expect to see for work. That's it. Okay, you would put the 300 divided by 5 to tell me that you're dividing, but then you'd let the calculator, or in this case your brain, do the math for you and tell me that it equals 60. Is that understood? That's all I expect to see for work. Questions? All right, you and your partner are going to do the last 4 questions on that page together, and then we will come back together to answer them. Go! Alrighty, here we go. Number 10, how did you write it as a ratio? Sorry, I can't hear you. What? 98 over 4. 23, what did you do to solve the problem? Very good. 98 divided by 4, so 24. What's my answer? And how did you label that? All right, so that is what your answer is. I know that seems weird because you can't have half a person, right? Okay, so if you were to round on this one, what would you tell me? Now, question, what if it said like 24.2? You still have to go up because otherwise you'd be getting rid of a person. And you can't get rid of a person. So anytime you're talking about people or things like that, even if it's not one that would round up, you round always up on those ones, okay, guys? But this doesn't tell you to round, so leave it as is, even though it's extremely weird. Got it? Okay. Good job, guys. Number 6. How did you write the next one as a ratio? Excellent. Number 5. What did you do to solve it? Perfect. 15. What's my answer?
8 chairs per row.
Perfect. 8 chairs per row. Nicely done. 18. How did you write the next one as a ratio? Perfect. Number 2. How did you solve it? Perfect. Number 20. What did you get as your answer? Perfect. Excellent. Number 12. How did you write the last one as a ratio? Number 1. How did you solve it? Perfect. And number 14. What's my answer? Sorry, I couldn't hear you. Say that again. There we go. 6 horses per stable. Questions, you guys? So that is pretty much all I expect for homework to look like, okay? Please make sure you label properly, because if you don't, even if you get the right answer, your answer is wrong. Is that understood? Very important to label properly. Addison. You can use the colon. Yep, as long as it's written as a ratio. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Yes, good question. She asked, is the only reason we didn't do the slash like we did on these ones? That slash stands for per. And when we look at this one, this stands for miles per hour. So that P takes the place of that slash. Great question. Claire. You round based on what the problem is asking you for. Well, if it's money, how many decimal places always come after with money? So you should have 2. But then make sure you round properly based off of that third one. Does that make sense? Campbell. Yeah, like if you wrote miles / hour. Absolutely. That's totally fine. Great questions, you guys. Other questions? Yes, ma'am. Yes. Yes. Money always goes on top, whether it's written first or written last. Money's always on top, no matter what. Great question. Tomorrow we're going to do more with this, but more specifically with money involved. And so we'll do a lot more money practice tomorrow specifically. Good questions, guys. Any other questions?